You're lying in bed, and your mind is scanning, not for threats, for meaning. That conversation 3 days ago, why did they say it that way? The dream last night with the broken clock, the song that came on exactly when you were thinking about them. Your chest tightens, not with fear, but with a specific kind of pressure, the pressure of unanswered significance. You pull out your journal, you replay the sequence. You ask the question you've asked 1,000 times. What does this mean? It happens everywhere. After a breakup, you're not just grieving, you're excavating. What was this teaching me? Why did I attract this? What pattern am I supposed to see? You lose a job, and within hours you're constructing a narrative about timing, about necessary destruction, about the universe redirecting you. A chance encounter at a coffee shop becomes a sign. A recurring symbol in your dreams becomes a message you must decode. And here's what nobody tells you. There's a specific sensation that accompanies this. It's not just mental. Your body leans forward slightly, your breath shallows. There's a tightness across your sternum, like something is trying to organize itself inside your chest. You feel pulled, not toward action, but toward understanding. But when you try to explain this to others, you hit a wall. You're overthinking it. You're reading too much into things. Not everything means something. And so you learn to keep it quiet. The compulsion doesn't stop, it just goes underground. You still scan, you still search. You just stop saying it out loud. There's a specific shame that comes with this. The shame of being that person. The one who can't just let things be. The one who turns a flat tire into a metaphor. The one who needs every ending to be an initiation and every beginning to be fate. But here's what Carl Jung understood that the just get over it crowd doesn't. This is not neurotic overinterpretation. This is a fundamental drive. Jung wrote that man cannot stand a meaningless life. Not prefers meaning, not enjoys meaning, cannot stand its absence. For you, this isn't a preference or a personality quirk. It's an imperative. Your psyche, the totality of your conscious and unconscious mind, is oriented toward telos, toward purpose, toward becoming something it isn't yet. You're not broken for needing meaning in everything. You're responding to the psyche's deepest instruction. Organize experience, find coherence, move toward wholeness. But here's what most people miss. That drive, that relentless need, is pointing at something. Not out there in the cosmic order. Not in signs and synchronicities. It's pointing at something structural. Something operating beneath your awareness. This video will show you 3 things. First, what's actually operating beneath this pattern, the hidden architecture that creates the need. Second, what lives in the shadow of your noble search, the parts you don't want to see. And third, what wholeness actually looks like for someone wired this way. Not how to stop seeking meaning, how to become the meaning you've been hunting. The compulsion you've just recognized isn't monolithic. What you've been calling the need for meaning is actually 3 distinct psychological hungers, each with its own mechanism and signature. Confusing them is why nothing satisfies. When you say, "I need meaning," you think you're describing one thing. You're not. You're describing 3 separate hungers, and they don't feed the same way. This is why nothing works, why therapy helps but doesn't satisfy, why achievement feels hollow, why you keep searching even after you've figured it out. You're trying to feed one hunger with food meant for another. Psychologists Frank Martella and Michael Steger mapped this terrain. They identified 3 distinct dimensions of what we collapse into the single word meaning: coherence, purpose, significance. Each one operates differently. Each one demands different attention. And when you can't differentiate them, you starve while surrounded by food. Coherence is the hunger that asks, does my life make sense? This is the scramble to connect dots, to build narrative, to make the pieces fit into something comprehensible. You feel this as fragmentation anxiety, that specific panic when your story doesn't hold together, when the person you were 5 years ago seems incompatible with who you are now, when your choices feel random, contradictory, chaotic. Jung called this the drive for integration. The psyche cannot tolerate contradiction without attempting to resolve it. So you journal obsessively, you reanalyze the past, searching for the thread. You construct cosmologies of the self, elaborate systems that explain how everything connects. Your body knows this hunger. It's the sensation of mental pieces scattered across a table and your hands trying to force them into a puzzle. The tightness behind your eyes. The compulsion to understand before you can rest. Purpose is the hunger that asks, where am I going? Not, what does this mean, but what am I for? This is felt as restlessness, a directional pull. Your body leans forward, can't settle. There's a specific physical signature, feet tapping, jaw clenched, chest pressing outward like something is trying to escape through your sternum. Jung understood this as the teleological nature of the psyche, the fact that you are oriented toward a future possibility, not just shaped by past causes. You're not just seeking goals, you're responding to the psyche's demand for trajectory, for movement toward what you could become. This is why you obsess over mission statements, why you can't do work that feels arbitrary, why just paying the bills feels like a kind of death. Purpose hunger doesn't care about stability, it cares about direction. Significance is the hunger that asks, does this matter? Not comprehensibility, not direction, inherent value, the feeling that your life is worth living, that what you do carries weight. Jung called this the experience of the numinous, the sacred quality that makes something feel important beyond utility. You feel this absence as hollowness, a specific kind of emptiness that no amount of productivity touches. You can have coherence, your life makes perfect sense. You can have purpose, you know exactly where you're going, and still feel like none of it matters, like you're performing significance rather than experiencing it. This hunger shows up as the rejection of ordinary life, the need to be special, the compulsion to make everything count as more than it appears to be. And here's the trap. You try to satisfy all three with the same strategy. You use analysis to create purpose. You use achievement to generate significance. You use busyness to manufacture coherence. But coherence work, therapy, journaling, integration won't feed purpose hunger. And accomplishment, career success, goals achieved won't cure significance starvation. The psyche is precise. It knows what it needs. The question is whether you can differentiate the signal clearly enough to feed what's actually starving. These three hungers exist for a reason. They're not arbitrary psychological noise, but functional responses to how the psyche actually operates. Understanding this structure changes everything about how you relate to your quest. So why do these three hungers exist at all? Why is your psyche wired to demand coherence, purpose, and significance? Why can't you just be without needing everything to mean something? Because your psyche has a direction, and that changes everything. This is where Jung broke from Freud in a way that matters specifically to you. Freud looked backward. He explained the psyche through past causes, trauma, repression, childhood wounds. Your neurosis was the result of what happened to you. Jung looked forward. He saw the psyche as oriented toward what you could become, not just pushed by the past, but pulled by potential. He called this the prospective function of the unconscious. Your psyche isn't just reacting, it's preparing. It's organizing your experiences, dreams, impulses, interests, random encounters into a developmental curriculum. Every nightmare that won't leave you alone, every book that appears at exactly the right moment, every person you can't stop thinking about. These aren't accidents. They're arranged, not by fate, not by the universe, by the self. The self is not you. It's the organizing principle within you. Think of it this way. Your ego is the executive. It makes decisions, navigates the day, manages relationships. But the self is the CEO with the long-term vision. The ego thinks it's in charge. The self knows better. It contains the blueprint for who you could become, the totality of your psychological potential, and it's constantly nudging you toward that pattern. This is why you feel like everything happens for a reason. Not magical thinking, structural reality. Your unconscious assigns certain experiences the function of being clues. It highlights them, tags them with significance. Not because the cosmos cares, but because your psyche is trying to steer you toward integration, toward becoming whole. The directionality you feel is real. It's just not external. It's the pressure of the self pressing against the boundaries of your current identity. And here's what this means for those three hungers. They're not arbitrary, they're functional. Coherence isn't neurotic overanalysis. It's the psyche's demand that you integrate the fragments, that you bring unconscious material into consciousness without falling apart. When your life doesn't make sense, your psyche creates anxiety to force you to resolve the contradiction. It's a corrective signal. You're off course. Purpose isn't restless ambition. It's the psyche's teleological orientation toward what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are, not who you were conditioned to be. That forward lean, that directional pull, it's the self calling you toward your unrealized potential. When you feel aimless, you're not lazy. You're ignoring the blueprint. Significance isn't narcissism. It's the psyche's response to the numinous, the sacred quality that makes life worth living. When existence feels hollow, it's because you've cut yourself off from what Jung called the religious function of the psyche. The need for your life to matter isn't ego, it's soul. And this is why you can't think your way out of this. Why more analysis doesn't satisfy. Why achievement feels empty. Why you keep searching even when you've figured it out. Because you're trying to use the ego to do the self's work. The ego can't see the blueprint. It's like using a flashlight to see what's holding the flashlight. You're asking the wrong part of yourself for answers. The self already knows where you're going. The question is whether you can stop demanding answers and start listening to the direction. But here's the problem. The moment you start listening, the moment you open yourself to that pull, you also open yourself to what's hidden beneath it. The shadow of the noble quest, the part you don't want to see. The self's call toward wholeness is real. But running alongside that genuine teleological pull is another force, one that distorts the quest into something else entirely. This is where the meaning maker must develop ruthless self-honesty. You're searching for meaning because the self is calling you toward wholeness. That's the noble story, but there's another story running beneath it. One you don't tell at dinner parties. Your spiritual seeking isn't just about evolution, it's also about control. It's also about specialness. It's also about escape. This is the shadow of the meaning maker, and it operates whether you acknowledge it or not. Jung defined the shadow as everything you've rejected about yourself, every trait, impulse, and motivation that doesn't fit your self-image. For you, the self-image is seeker, conscious, awake. So the shadow contains what contradicts that: grandiosity, narcissism, avoidance. Notice how your chest shifts when you find meaning others miss. A subtle inflation. Shoulders back. A quiet superiority. I see what they don't. This isn't conscious, it's automatic. But it's there. You're not just seeking truth, you're seeking proof of your specialness. Jung called this archetypal inflation, when you identify with the quest itself rather than undertake it. The difference is surgical. I feel called to this work, versus I am the chosen one. One positions you as participant. The other positions you as prophet. And when you slip into prophet mode, you stop learning. You start performing enlightenment. Watch how you talk about your journey. Do you invite dialogue, Or do you lecture? Do you explore uncertainty? Or do you deliver revelations? When someone challenges your interpretation, do you pause, or do you dismiss them as still asleep? The inflation has a physical signature. Your voice drops half an octave. Your gestures slow, become more deliberate. You're no longer speaking with someone, you're speaking down to them. This is the demon at work, the archetypal protector that inflates your ego to compensate for the terror of insignificance. Then there's the escapism. Be honest, how much of your meaning-making is actually avoidance? You analyze the synchronicity instead of paying your taxes. You journal about your calling instead of having the difficult conversation. You search for cosmic purpose while neglecting the ordinary responsibility sitting in front of you. The quest becomes the excuse. I can't settle for less than my soul's purpose. Sounds noble, but it also conveniently absolves you from showing up for the mundane, from being present in relationships that don't feel destined, from doing work that doesn't feel aligned. And then there's the projection trap. Everything becomes a message for you. Every person becomes a symbol in your story. You meet someone, and within minutes, you've assigned them an archetypal role: mentor, shadow figure, anima projection. You're not seeing them, you're seeing what they represent in your personal myth. This is a subtle violence. You've reduced a human being to a meaning delivery system. The same happens with events. Synchronicity becomes apophenia, the pathological detection of patterns where none exist. You see threes everywhere and call it sacred geometry. You lose your keys and call it a message about attachment. The cosmic breadcrumbs lead you in circles because you're creating them as you walk. Jung warned about this. He distinguished between the symbol, which carries genuine numinosity and points beyond itself, and the sign, which you've arbitrarily assigned meaning. When you're projecting, everything is a sign. Nothing is allowed to just be. And here's the unconscious cost you're not calculating. Your relationships erode. People tire of being interpreted. They want to be seen, not analyzed. They want your presence, not your wisdom about what their behavior means about your journey. Your body disappears. You live so completely in meaning space, in interpretation, analysis, symbolic thinking, that you lose contact with physical reality. You're not hungry, you're energetically depleted. You're not tired, you're integrating a download. And the cruelest irony, you analyze instead of act. You spend so much time decoding what the universe is telling you that you never actually move. The quest for meaning becomes paralysis dressed up as spiritual depth. This is what Jung meant when he said the goal is not to dissolve into the infinite, but to relate to it while standing firmly on the earth. You need the quest. But the quest cannot become your identity, because the moment it does, you've stopped individuating, you've started performing. And the psyche will correct this. Forcibly, if necessary. The shadow behaviors, inflation, escapism, projection, aren't the root issue. They're compensations for something deeper, something structural. To understand why the compulsion persists despite its costs, we need to examine what's broken at the foundation. But the shadow, the inflation, the escapism, the projection, these aren't the deepest issue. They're symptoms. What you're actually dealing with is structural damage. There's an axis inside you, and it's broken. Jung called it the ego-self axis, the connecting line between your conscious identity, ego, and the organizing center of your entire psyche, self. When this axis is intact, you feel connected to something larger than yourself. Life has inherent meaning without you having to hunt for it. Purpose flows naturally. You don't need to decode every event because you trust the underlying pattern. When this axis is damaged, you experience what Jung called meaning anxiety. Not general anxiety, not fear of specific outcomes, a particular existential panic, the terror that nothing connects to anything, that you're adrift, that the universe is random and your life is arbitrary. You know this feeling. It's 3 a.m, and suddenly your entire biography feels like a series of accidents. The story you've been telling yourself about who you are and why you're here, it collapses, and beneath it, nothing, just noise. Just matter colliding. The compulsion to find meaning in everything is your attempt to repair this axis. You're not over-interpreting, you're scaffolding. You're trying to rebuild the connection between your small self and the larger organizing intelligence of the psyche. Every synchronicity you notice, every pattern you detect, every symbolic interpretation, these are repair attempts, the ego desperately trying to re-establish contact with the self. But here's what most people don't understand. You can't repair this axis through the ego alone. It's structurally impossible. The ego is one end of the axis. It cannot reach across the gap and grab the other end. It's like trying to lift yourself by your own collar. So what damages this axis in the first place? Trauma, the shattering of the innocent ego, the part of you that trusted reality, severs the connection. You stop feeling held by something larger. The psyche fragments, and the axis breaks. Over-rationalization, when you kill the numinous with logic, when you reduce everything to mechanism, when you strip the world of its sacred quality, you cut yourself off from the self's language, which speaks in symbol and image, not concept. Cultural wounding, the collective complexes you've absorbed, the historical traumas, the inherited shame, the unprocessed grief of your lineage, these distort the axis, bending it away from your actual individuation path and toward the culture's unfinished business. And adaptation. The relentless pressure to build a persona, the social mask, at the expense of soul. You learn to perform normalcy, to hide your strangeness, to fit. And in the process, you lose contact with the self's signal. The axis phrase. When this axis breaks, the symptoms appear, and they're not pathology, they're signals. Depression. The psyche withdraws energy from whatever you're doing because it's the wrong path. Jung called this abaissement du niveau mental, a lowering of the mental level. It feels like you're dying, but it's the self saying, stop, this direction is false. Anxiety. The psyche screaming that you're off course. The panic isn't random, it's directional. It increases the further you move from your actual trajectory. Obsessive meaning-seeking. The frantic search for significance is the ego trying to compensate for the lost connection. You're hunting externally for what can only be found structurally. Jung wrote that neurosis is the suffering of a soul which has not discovered its meaning. Not discovered its purpose, discovered its meaning. The felt sense that existence is coherent and connected to something beyond the ego's comprehension. Your panic isn't pathology, it's the psyche trying to correct you. And you can't think your way out of this. You can't analyze your way back to connection, because the work required isn't intellectual, it's structural. It requires the participation of both ends of the axis. The ego must stop demanding answers and start listening, and the self must be invited back into relationship. This is where most meaning seekers get stuck. They keep using the tool that's broken, the ego, to fix what only relationship can repair. For many meaning makers, the axis didn't erode gradually, it shattered, and that shattering, that moment of unbearable breaking, often marks the beginning of the quest. Understanding how trauma functions in the individuation process reframes suffering entirely. For many of you, the meaning quest didn't begin with curiosity. It began with shattering, a death, a betrayal, a collapse so complete that the person you were before ceased to exist. And in that breaking, something else started. The compulsive need to understand why, to extract purpose from devastation, to find the meaning that makes the pain bearable. This is trauma as catalyst, and Jung understood it differently than you've been taught. The contemporary view treats trauma as damage, something to heal, recover from, get past. And yes, trauma damages. But Jung saw something else, trauma as potential initiation. Not because suffering is noble, but because it does something the ego cannot do on its own. It breaks the shell. The innocent ego, the part of you that trusted reality, that believed in fairness, that thought you were safe, gets shattered. And in that shattering, the psyche is forced to reorganize around a deeper center. Not the ego, the self. You know this if you've lived it. Before the trauma, you could coast. You could live on the surface, adapt, perform, achieve. After the trauma, that's no longer possible. Something inside you won't allow it. You're pulled inward, forced to ask questions you could avoid before. Who am I beneath the roles? What matters when nothing matters? What holds when everything breaks? The meaning quest often begins here, in the rubble, but trauma doesn't just destroy, it also protects. And this is where it gets complex. Jungian analyst Donald Kalsched mapped this terrain. He described what he calls the self-care system, the psyche's archetypal defense against overwhelming pain. When trauma threatens to annihilate the core of who you are, autonomous figures arise from the unconscious. Guardian angels, inner demons, protectors. They dissociate you from the unbearable. They build walls around the traumatized spirit, keeping it safe, frozen, innocent. But here's the problem. The same mechanism that protects you also imprisons you. The demon that saved you from complete disintegration now prevents you from fully living. It keeps you split. It won't let you integrate the wound because integration means feeling it. And feeling it feels like death. So you do something else. You turn the trauma into narrative, into meaning, into initiation story. This happened for a reason. I was meant to go through this. It was the fire that forged me. And yes, there's truth here. Jung wrote, "The spirit is the life of the body seen from within. Suffering can break the ego's shell, allowing something larger to enter. The wound becomes the opening. The crisis becomes the call. This is what's known as post-traumatic growth, the psyche's capacity to reorganize around a deeper center after catastrophe. You construct a narrative where the trauma wasn't just damage, it was curriculum, the necessary descent that prepared you for the ascent. And the archetype that emerges from this process is the wounded healer, the one who transforms their pain into wisdom, who uses their experience to help others navigate similar darkness. Your suffering gains purpose through service. But watch carefully, because there's a shadow here too. The moment you identify as the wounded one, you're stuck. Your entire identity becomes organized around what happened to you. You're no longer healing, you're performing healing. You're no longer integrating, you're broadcasting your integration. The wound becomes your credential, your authority, your specialness. And unconsciously, you resist complete healing because complete healing would mean losing the identity you've built around being wounded. Jung's insight: integration means you're healed enough to help, wounded enough to understand. Not healed completely, not identified with the wound, but holding both, the scar and the wisdom it produced, without collapsing into either. The trauma did break the axis. It did shatter your innocent trust, but that breaking also forced you inward. It initiated the quest, and now the work is to transform the quest from a reaction to the wound into a relationship with wholeness. Not, I seek meaning because I'm broken, but I seek meaning because the breaking revealed that there's something to seek. The wound woke you. But staying awake requires something different than endlessly analyzing what woke you. Understanding the structure, the three hungers, the self's direction, the shadow dynamics, the broken axis, the initiating trauma, is essential. But understanding alone doesn't repair. Integration requires shifting from intellectual analysis to active relationship with the unconscious, from hunting to recognizing. So if you can't think your way out and the ego can't repair the axis alone, what actually works? The shift from hunting to recognizing. Hunting is what you've been doing, interrogating events, demanding that life explain itself, chasing synchronicities like clues in a detective novel, analyzing dreams until they lose their numinosity. It's frantic, desperate, the energy of someone drowning, grasping at anything that floats. Recognizing is different. It's quiet, receptive. It's the difference between grabbing and allowing, between demanding answers and creating space for the psyche to speak. And this shift requires specific practices, not spiritual bypassing, not more journaling about your feelings, but concrete methodologies that change your relationship to the unconscious. Active imagination. Direct dialogue. This is Jung's central technique, and it's wildly misunderstood. Active imagination is not passive fantasy, not daydreaming, not visualization. It's active ethical engagement with autonomous figures from the unconscious. Here's how it works. You invite the part of you that's driving the meaning quest to step forward. Not metaphorically. Actually, you give it voice. You ask it directly. What are you trying to show me? What do you need me to understand? And then, this is the crucial part, you listen. You don't analyze the response. You don't immediately interpret it. You let the figure speak. And often, what emerges is not what you expected. The part you thought was your wise inner guide reveals itself as terrified. The part you thought was protecting you reveals itself as controlling. The demon that's been demanding meaning reveals that it's trying to prevent you from feeling something unbearable. Active imagination lowers the threshold between ego and unconscious. It invites the other into dialogue, and the figures speak when you stop demanding answers and start relating. Shadow work. Reclaiming energy. You know that person who annoys you? The one obsessed with their spiritual journey, always posting about their soul's purpose. Treating every minor inconvenience as a cosmic lesson. That irritation is a signal. What you judge in others is what you've disowned in yourself. Shadow work is simple but brutal. Notice what you judge and ask, where do I do this? Not, do I do this? What? Where? Because if it triggers you, you contain it. The grandiosity you mock in others is your own inflated meaning, making projected outward. Integration means pulling the projection back, saying, I contain this too. Not to justify it, not to celebrate it, but to own it. To reclaim the energy trapped in judgment and use it for actual growth. Every projection you withdraw is energy returned to the individuation process. Every shadow trait you integrate is one less unconscious driver controlling your behavior. Dream journaling, night world wisdom. Your dreams are direct communication from the self. Not in the pop psychology sense. Dreaming about water means emotions. In the structural sense, the unconscious is showing you where the ego is off course. The practice isn't about decoding individual symbols, it's about tracking patterns over time. Notice what recurs, notice the tone, notice what the dream ego does versus what you do consciously. Is the dream ego running, hiding, fighting, submitting? That's showing you the unconscious attitude you're carrying. The dreams aren't cryptic messages, they're mirrors. And when you pay attention, the unconscious adjusts. It realizes the ego is listening, and the communication becomes clearer. You don't need a dream dictionary, you need consistency. Write them down, read them weekly, notice themes. The self corrects when the ego strays, but only if you're paying attention. Life crafting, grounded purpose. Here's where most meaning seekers go wrong. They try to build identity around their quest. I am a seeker. I am a healer. I am on a mission. Identity is static. It becomes a prison. The moment you identify as something, you resist anything that challenges that identity. Life crafting is different. Instead of identity, you work with values. Not, I am a creative person on a mission, but I value creativity. Not, I am called to heal, but I value service. Values guide behavior without collapsing into identity. They allow you to act without needing your actions to mean something about who you are. And this is crucial. Small aligned actions matter more than grand symbolic gestures. You don't need to quit your job to live meaningfully. You need to bring your values into the work you're already doing. You don't need a mission statement tattooed on your chest. You need to notice where your daily choices align with or betray what you actually care about. Purpose doesn't emerge from figuring out your destiny. It emerges from living in alignment with what matters. The coherence you've been hunting appears when you stop performing significance and start embodying values. These practices, active imagination, shadow work, dream journaling, life crafting, they address different dimensions of the fragmented psyche. Active imagination repairs the ego-self axis. Shadow work reclaims projected energy. Dreams provide corrective guidance. Life crafting grounds purpose in action. But none of them fix you, because wholeness isn't a destination. The practices shift your relationship to the unconscious from demand to dialogue. But what does success look like? Not arrival, not cure, but a fundamentally different way of being in relationship with meaning itself. So what does integration actually look like for someone wired this way? Not enlightenment, not the end of seeking, not a state where you've transcended the need for meaning and float above it all in detached wisdom. Integration looks like this. You still sense patterns, but you don't collapse into them. You notice the synchronicity, the book that appears exactly when you need it, the conversation that echoes your morning dream. But you don't build your identity around being the person who sees signs. You allow it to be interesting without making it everything. You find significance in your work, your relationships, your creative projects, but you don't need them to be cosmically ordained to matter. Washing dishes can carry meaning. A conversation with a stranger can be sacred. You're no longer measuring experiences against some imagined hierarchy of spiritual importance. You hold coherence lightly. Your life makes sense, but you've developed tolerance for paradox, for the parts that don't fit, for the chapters of your biography that refuse to resolve into neat narrative. You're comfortable saying, I don't know what that meant yet, and leaving it there. The integrated meaning maker lives purposefully without needing a mission statement. Direction emerges from aligned action, not from decoding destiny. You move toward what calls you without needing to prove it's the calling. You do the next right thing and trust that the larger pattern will reveal itself, not to your ego, but to the self, which sees further than you can. These are the signs of integration. You can let some events just be events. The flat tire is sometimes just a flat tire. Not everything is trying to tell you something. And when you release the compulsion to extract meaning from every moment, you paradoxically become more available to actual numinosity when it appears. Synchronicities still happen, but you notice them without worshiping them. You're grateful for the moment of resonance without needing it to be proof of cosmic favor. The meaningful coincidence enriches your experience without dictating your choices. Your tolerance for ambiguity increases. You can hold questions longer. You can sit with uncertainty without immediately collapsing into analysis. The need for everything to make sense right now loosens. You trust that understanding will arrive when, and only when, you're ready to hold it. And meaning begins appearing in the ordinary, not just in peak experiences and mystical revelations, but in the texture of daily life. The weight of a coffee cup in your hand, the rhythm of your breath, the way light moves across the floor. You're no longer so busy hunting for significance that you miss the significance already present. But here's the paradox Jung understood. You never fully arrive. Individuation is asymptotic. You approach wholeness, but never complete it. Not because you're failing, but because wholeness isn't a state to achieve. It's a relationship to maintain, between ego and self, between consciousness and unconscious, between what you know and what remains mysterious. The quest doesn't end. It transforms from, what is life trying to tell me? To, what is wanting to live through me, from victim or chosen one? To participant in an unfolding you don't fully control or comprehend. You shift from demanding that the universe explain itself to allowing your own life to be the explanation. Not the answer, the question being lived. And there's a price for this consciousness. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't return to innocent randomness. Once the axis begins to repair, once you've tasted the connection between ego and self, you become responsible for maintaining it. Awareness brings obligation, but the weight lightens when it's shared. Not carried alone by the ego, but distributed across the entire psyche. The ego still navigates, still decides, still acts, but it does so in consultation with something larger, in dialogue with the self. This is what Jung meant by the goal of analysis, not to dissolve into the infinite, but to stand in relationship with it, firmly planted on earth, awake to the depths, living the paradox of being both small and vast, finite and connected to something that isn't. You don't solve the need for meaning. You develop a relationship with the need. You learn its language. You honor its function. You allow it to guide you without letting it consume you. The meaning maker who has integrated their drive doesn't stop seeking. They stop hunting. They've learned to recognize what arrives naturally instead of chasing what forever recedes. And in that shift, from desperation to receptivity, the axis repairs. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough. Enough to live, enough to grow, enough to continue the work. This journey from recognition through shadow confrontation to integration is not linear. It's cyclical, deepening with each turn. The meaning maker's task is not to escape their nature, but to mature it into conscious service of wholeness. This consciousness work is not easy. You're doing something most people spend their entire lives avoiding, facing the depths, acknowledging the shadow, repairing what's broken without pretending it was never damaged. The meaning quest, when made conscious, becomes sacred task, not solving yourself, unfolding yourself, not arriving at answers. Learning to live the questions with more grace. You're not here by accident. The psyche that demands meaning in everything, that refuses to let life be random, that insists on coherence even when the pieces scatter, that psyche knows what it's doing. It's pushing you toward wholeness, toward integration, toward becoming what you've always been but couldn't yet see. The work is in the living, not the understanding. Your psyche will continue to speak, in dreams, in synchronicities, in the people who appear and the losses that reshape you. Trust the process, even when it looks like chaos. Especially then. Thank you for exploring this with me. If this resonated, I invite you to like and subscribe. This work deepens when we're not alone in it. Share this with someone who might recognize themselves here, and leave a comment with your reflections. What emerged for you? Where did you feel seen? Thank you for doing this consciousness work. See you in the next exploration.